Jessica's thoughts were filled with Han Wu's touch, the brief moment when he cupped her face, his thumb brushing her jaw. It was a memory that replayed over and over in her mind, sending her heart racing and her stomach fluttering with excitement. Yet, at the same time, she couldn't ignore the fear that lingered beneath it all. She was falling for him, and she knew it was dangerous. She had come to Seoul to start afresh, to care for Minjun, and to find stability. But now, her emotions were tangled in a web she wasn't sure she could escape from. The line between professional and personal had become blurred, and every time she saw Han Wu, the attraction between them seemed to intensify. That morning, as Jessica prepared to leave for the market to gather some supplies, Mrs. Park approached her in the hallway. The older woman's expression was unreadable, her tone formal. "Miss Jessica, the young master has asked for you to accompany him to a meeting this afternoon." Jessica blinked, caught off guard. "A meeting? What kind of meeting?" Mrs. Park didn't answer directly, simply motioning for her to follow. The staff seemed to be avoiding eye contact with her as she walked past them, a cold chill settling in the pit of her stomach. She wasn't sure why Han Wu wanted her at the meeting, but it didn't feel like a simple request. When they arrived at the main hall, Han Wu was already there, standing by the large window, looking out over the expansive grounds. His posture was tense, his face shadowed by the weight of the day. When he turned to acknowledge her, his eyes softened just slightly. "You came," he said, his voice a little rough. Jessica nodded, trying to steady her racing heart. "Of course. What's going on?" Han Wu exhaled slowly, walking toward her. "I need you to sit in on this meeting. I know you're not familiar with the business side of things, but there's something I need you to hear." Jessica frowned, confused. "What could I possibly add to your business meeting?" He glanced at her, a fleeting expression crossing his face before he masked it. "You'll understand when we're there." Before she could ask anything further, they were escorted into a sleek, modern conference room. Around the table sat several of Han Wu's business partners, all men in expensive suits who barely glanced at her as she entered. There was a thick, almost palpable tension in the air, and Jessica felt out of place instantly. The meeting began, and Han Wu immediately took control, his voice commanding and authoritative as he discussed the latest developments in the Han Group. But as the meeting progressed, Jessica began to notice something. There was an edge to Han Wu's voice that she hadn't heard before. The usual calm and controlled demeanor was slipping, replaced by something darker. He was frustrated, more than frustrated. He was furious. And the source of his anger was becoming clear as the men at the table began to speak in hushed tones, exchanging looks that made Jessica uncomfortable. "The construction project isn't on track," one of the men said, his tone critical. "You're pushing us too hard, Han Wu. This will cost the company more money than you've calculated." Han Wu's eyes narrowed, and he leaned forward. "You think I don't know that?" His voice was dangerously low, and Jessica could feel the tension rising. The air in the room seemed to thicken, and the once calm business partners grew silent. "I'm not asking for your opinions," Han Wu continued, his voice cold and sharp. "I'm telling you that we need to push forward, no matter the cost. We're going to finish this project on time, or you'll all find yourselves out of a job." The men exchanged uneasy glances, but none of them spoke. Han Wu's presence was suffocating, and the room seemed to shrink under the weight of his authority. Jessica watched in silence, her stomach twisting at the intensity of the situation. She had seen Han Wu in control before, but this was something else entirely. His anger was palpable, and it made her realize just how much was at stake for him. As the meeting drew to a close, Han Wu dismissed everyone without ceremony, his expression hard and unreadable. The room emptied quickly, and the tension that had been hanging in the air finally began to dissipate. Jessica stood in the corner, unsure of what to do next. She had seen a side of Han Wu that she hadn't expected, something raw and unfiltered. It was unsettling, and yet it was also undeniably magnetic. Han Wu turned to her, his eyes softer now, though still clouded with frustration. "You should go back to your room," he said, his voice low. "I'll be in my office if you need anything." Jessica nodded, but as she turned to leave, she felt a hand on her arm. Han Wu's grip was firm, but gentle, and he pulled her back slightly. "Jessica," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "I didn't mean to scare you." Her heart skipped a beat as she looked into his eyes, finding something vulnerable there. "It's okay," she whispered back. "I'm not scared." For a long moment, they stood there, the space between them charged with something neither of them could ignore. Then, slowly, Hanwoo released her arm and stepped back. "Thank you," he said, his voice rough once more. Without another word, Jessica turned and walked out of the room, her mind spinning. The boundaries between them were shifting, breaking apart. And she wasn't sure if she was ready for what was coming next. As she made her way back to her room, she couldn't help but feel a sense of dread. Things were changing, and no matter how hard she tried to resist, she was falling deeper into the chaos that was Hanwoo's world. Jessica couldn't sleep that night. The events of the day had stirred a whirlwind of emotions in her. The intensity of the meeting still lingered in her mind, and Hanwoo's words and actions kept replaying in her thoughts. There had been a vulnerability in him, something he usually kept hidden beneath his cold, calculated exterior. It was a side of him she hadn't seen before, and it left her feeling uncertain, conflicted. She tossed and turned in bed, trying to shut out the thoughts that kept invading her mind. It was late when she finally gave up, slipping out of bed and walking toward the window. The moonlight bathed the garden in a soft glow, and she could hear the distant hum of the city in the background. Her heart ached with the realization that the boundaries she had so carefully constructed were beginning to dissolve. She had come to Korea with one purpose: to care for Minjun and find stability. But now, it seemed her emotions had become tangled in something far more complicated. A soft knock on the door broke her reverie. Jessica turned quickly, surprised. Who could it be at this hour? "Come in," she called, her voice barely above a whisper. The door opened, and to her surprise, Hanwoo stepped inside. His expression was unreadable, and the faint lines of stress around his eyes were more pronounced than before. "I didn't mean to disturb you," he began, his voice low, "but I needed to talk." Jessica's heart skipped a beat. She had thought about him constantly since their interaction earlier that day. She had even wondered if he would come to check on her, but she hadn't expected him to appear at her door. "It's fine," she said softly, her voice betraying the rush of emotions inside her. He hesitated for a moment, then walked toward her. The space between them seemed charged with an undeniable energy, and Jessica could feel her pulse quicken. He stopped just a few feet away from her, his gaze locked with hers. "Jessica," he started, his voice barely a whisper. "I'm sorry. I know I've been distant. But the truth is, I've never known how to be anything but that." His words hung in the air, and the vulnerability in his tone caught her off guard. "You don't need to apologize," Jessica replied, taking a small step forward. "I understand. It's just all of this is so new. For both of us." Hanwoo sighed, a tired, almost defeated sound. He ran a hand through his hair and looked down, as if lost in thought. "I've always been in control. I built this company, this life. But now, with you, with Minjun," he trailed off, as if unsure how to finish his sentence. Jessica's heart softened at his words. She had seen the cold, ruthless businessman that Hanwoo was, but this was different. This was the man who had been quietly struggling to hold everything together. "I'm not asking you to change for me," Jessica said gently. I want you to know that I'm here. I care about Minjun, and I care about you." The room fell into a tense silence as Hanwoo studied her, his expression unreadable. Jessica's heart raced as the space between them seemed to shrink. She could feel the pull, the magnetic tension that had been building between them for so long. Before she could say anything else, Hanwoo closed the gap between them, his hands gently cupping her face. His touch was warm, and Jessica's breath caught in her throat as his eyes searched hers for any sign of hesitation. "You don't know how much I need to hear that," Hanwoo whispered, his voice rough with emotion. Without another word, he leaned in, his lips meeting hers in a kiss that was tender, yet full of longing. It was slow at first, tentative, as if they were both testing the waters. But then, as the kiss deepened, the world around them seemed to disappear. The walls they had built between them crumbled, And for that moment, there was no past, no future, only the present and the undeniable connection they shared. When they finally pulled apart, they stood there in the silence, their breaths heavy, their hearts racing. Jessica's mind was a blur, her thoughts swirling as she tried to make sense of what had just happened. Han-woo's gaze softened as he looked at her. I don't want to make things complicated, he said quietly. But I need you to know that you mean more to me than you realize. Jessica's heart swelled with emotion, but she couldn't quite find the words to respond. I don't know where this will go, she whispered, her voice tinged with uncertainty. But I don't want to let go of what we have. Han-woo nodded slowly, his hand still resting on her cheek. I feel the same too. And in that moment, Jessica knew that everything, her life, her heart, her future, was about to change forever. The following days felt like a blur for Jessica. Her mind, still reeling from the kiss, struggled to find clarity. The kiss had been everything and nothing at the same time. It had been everything because it solidified the feelings she had been suppressing for weeks, and it had been nothing because it changed everything between them. The next morning, Han-woo had been uncharacteristically distant. He was still his usual authoritative self, but there was a change in his demeanor when he looked at her, a mix of tenderness and something else she couldn't quite place. They hadn't spoken about the kiss. There had been no discussion, no explanations. But Jessica could sense the weight of the unspoken words that hovered in the air between them. It was as if both of them were waiting for something to happen, but neither knew how to move forward. Min-jun, as usual, was a bright spot in her life. He was the one who kept things light and carefree. His innocent curiosity about the world was infectious, and it helped to remind Jessica that she wasn't alone in this whirlwind of emotions. He would often run to her, his little arms open wide, calling for her attention, and all of Jessica's worries would momentarily fade. It was on one such day, as she played with Min-jun in the garden, that Han-woo appeared, watching from a distance. He leaned against the stone wall, arms crossed, observing her with an unreadable expression. You seem happy, he said, his voice softer than usual. Jessica looked up, surprised to see him there. I'm with Min-jun. Of course I'm happy, she replied, smiling warmly. Han-woo's gaze lingered on her a moment longer before he took a step forward. You seem different lately. Jessica paused. Different how? He shrugged, his eyes flickering briefly to the ground before meeting hers. I can't quite explain it, but I see it in the way you look at me, the way you are with Min-jun. Jessica felt a lump form in her throat. She wasn't sure what to say to him. Everything had changed. She had no idea how to navigate these new feelings that had grown so quickly. I care about both of you, she said quietly, her voice full of emotion. Han-woo's expression softened at her words. He stepped closer, the space between them narrowing once again. I've always been good at controlling everything. But when it comes to you, his words trailed off as he reached out and gently brushed a strand of hair away from her face. The warmth of his touch sent a shiver down her spine. She closed her eyes for a brief moment, feeling the weight of everything they hadn't yet said. I'm not sure where this is headed, she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. But I know that I don't want to walk away from you. For a long moment, Han-woo said nothing. But when he finally spoke, his voice was steady. Neither do I. And for the first time in weeks, Jessica felt as though she wasn't alone in this confusing, emotional journey. They were both in it together, no longer keeping their feelings hidden beneath layers of silence. Jessica's relationship with Han-woo had taken a dramatic turn, but there was still one person standing in the way, Han-woo's mother, Lady Han. Since Jessica's arrival at the mansion, Lady Han had made it clear that she didn't approve of her son's growing attachment to the young African woman. She had been polite, but her subtle jabs at Jessica's background and her role in the family were hard to ignore. One afternoon, as Jessica sat with Min-jun in the garden, she saw Lady Han approaching. The older woman's eyes were cold, her lips pursed tightly. Jessica stood to greet her, trying to maintain a cordial tone despite the tension in the air. Good afternoon, Lady Han, Jessica said, offering a polite smile. Lady Han didn't return the smile. Instead, Her eyes flicked toward Minjun, who was busy chasing butterflies. "How is the little one?" she asked, her tone clipped. "He's well," Jessica answered, her voice steady despite the unease that bubbled beneath the surface. Lady Han's gaze shifted back to Jessica, her eyes narrowing slightly. "You've become quite close to him, haven't you?" "My son has always been protective of his family, especially Minjun." Jessica nodded slowly. "I care for Minjun. He's a wonderful child." Lady Han's lips tightened, and she stepped closer, lowering her voice to a near whisper. "You might think that, but there's more at stake here than you realize. Han Wu is a man who doesn't easily allow people into his life. And I won't have someone like you complicating matters." Jessica felt a chill run down her spine. "I'm not here to complicate things. I just want to be here for Minjun." Lady Han's gaze hardened. "Just be careful, Miss Jessica. Some things are better left untouched." Over the following weeks, Jessica found herself walking a fine line between her growing affection for Han Wu and the mounting pressure from his family. Lady Han was relentless in her attempts to separate them, and it was becoming harder to ignore the cold stares and whispered conversations. Minjun, however, was oblivious to the tension. He continued to bring Jessica joy, his innocent laughter filling the mansion whenever he was around. But even his presence couldn't fully mask the growing conflict between Jessica and Han Wu. One night, Han Wu came to her room unexpectedly, looking more disheveled than usual. His tie was undone, his shirt sleeves rolled up in a rare display of exhaustion. "I can't stand it anymore, Jessica," he said, his voice raw. "My mother, the pressure, all of it. I just want us to be together." Jessica's heart skipped a beat, but a sense of unease settled in. "Han Wu, it's not just about us. You have a company to run, a family legacy to uphold. I don't want to be the one who makes things harder for you." He stepped closer, his hand reaching out to gently take hers. "I've been fighting for control my entire life. But now, I just want to fight for us." Han Wu had been avoiding the inevitable confrontation, but his mother had insisted on a formal meeting with Jessica. Jessica, heart pounding, tried to mentally prepare herself for what was to come. She had come to care deeply for Han Wu, and despite the growing pressures from his family, she wasn't ready to walk away from him. In the grand, intimidating study of the Han mansion, Lady Han sat in a high-backed chair, her regal presence filling the room. Jessica stood opposite her, trying to keep her composure. The older woman's cold gaze never left her, making Jessica feel like a child being scolded. "You must understand, Miss Jessica," Lady Han began, her tone dripping with formality. "This family is built on legacy. The Han Group is one of the largest corporations in Korea. We cannot afford the distractions of foreign influence. And you, with your background, are nothing but a risk to everything we have worked for." Jessica's heart thudded painfully in her chest, but she held her ground. "I'm not here to disrupt your family, Lady Han," she said calmly. "I came to Korea to help Minjun and find stability for myself. I never asked for any of this." Lady Han's eyes narrowed. "You may not have asked, but you've gotten involved. You've charmed my son, and he has allowed this relationship between you to grow. You must be aware of the consequences, yes." Jessica felt her throat tighten. The words hung in the air like an oppressive fog. "I know this isn't easy, but I care for Han Wu, and I care for Minjun. I don't want to make things harder for them. I just want to be here, to support them." Lady Han stood up slowly, walking toward the window as she looked out at the expansive garden. "It's not just about supporting them. You are threatening everything Han Wu has built. I will not stand idly by and let you tear apart my family." Jessica's voice was steady, but inside, she felt the weight of Lady Han's words bearing down on her. "I'm not trying to tear anything apart. I'm trying to build something. With Han Wu, with Minjun." Lady Han turned to face her then, her expression cold and resolute. "Then you need to leave. Leave my son, and leave my family alone." There it was. The ultimatum. Jessica felt her heart drop into her stomach. Every word from Lady Han was like a slap to her face. She fought the tears that threatened to come, but she knew she had to stand strong. "I won't leave," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "I love Hanwoo. He's now part of me, and I'm not going anywhere." For a long moment, Lady Han said nothing. Then she spoke, her words chilling. "Believe me, you'll regret this." Jessica didn't flinch. She wouldn't. Not now. Not when everything she had fought for was at stake. The days following the confrontation with Lady Han were the most difficult for Jessica. She and Hanwoo had barely spoken. The tension in the house had become unbearable. Minjun sensed the shift in the atmosphere and had become quieter, more withdrawn. Jessica's heart ached seeing him like this, but she knew he could feel the storm brewing. One evening, as Jessica sat on the balcony, gazing at the moonlit garden, she heard Hanwoo's footsteps behind her. She didn't turn to look at him, but she knew it was him. The sound of his movements had become familiar, as though his presence was etched into her very being. "Jessica," he said softly, his voice full of concern, "we need to talk." She sighed, turning to face him. His face was shadowed in the dim light, his expression unreadable. But she could see the struggle in his eyes. "I know," she replied quietly. "I think we need to talk too." They stood there for a moment, neither of them sure how to begin. Finally, Hanwoo took a step forward, his hand gently reaching for hers. "I never wanted any of this to happen. I never wanted to hurt you." Jessica took a deep breath. "Hanwoo, I know you didn't. But your family, your mother, they don't want us together. She's given me an ultimatum, and I'm not sure what we're supposed to do now." Hanwoo's jaw clenched in frustration. "I hate that she's done this. But I can't deny the truth anymore. She'll never accept you, Jessica. She's been controlling my life for too long, and I let her. I won't let her control this." Jessica's heart raced as she looked at him. His words were the beginning of something bigger, something that could change everything. "What are you saying?" she asked softly. Hanwoo's voice was steady, but there was a depth of emotion in it that made her heart ache. "I'm saying that I won't let you go. Not now, not ever." Jessica's breath caught in her throat. "Hanwoo, are you saying what I think you're saying?" He nodded slowly. "I'm willing to walk away from everything for you. I don't care about the company, or the legacy, or the expectations anymore. I want you, Jessica. I need you in my life." Tears welled in Jessica's eyes as she looked at him, her heart swelling with emotions she couldn't contain. "I don't want to lose you," she whispered. Hanwoo cupped her face gently, his thumb brushing away the tear that slid down her cheek. "Then don't. Let's leave. We'll go somewhere far away, somewhere where we can start fresh." Jessica's eyes widened. "What about Minjun?" "He's part of our future too," Hanwoo said, his voice full of conviction. "We'll take him with us. We'll build a life where we don't have to hide, where we can be happy together." And in that moment, Jessica knew that this was the only choice they could make. They would leave Korea, leave the legacy and expectations behind, and find a place where their love could grow freely. The decision was made. Jessica and Hanwoo packed their belongings in secret, not wanting to alert anyone to their plans. They arranged for Minjun to come with them, and though it wasn't easy, they managed to keep it all quiet until the day they left. On the morning of their departure, the car was packed with everything they needed, and they left the Han mansion behind, not looking back. As the car drove away from the gates, Jessica felt a mixture of relief and fear. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long while, she felt hope. They settled in a quiet town by the sea, far from the noise and expectations of the city. The house they found was small but cozy, and it became their sanctuary. Minjun thrived in the peaceful environment, and Hanwoo was more relaxed than Jessica had ever seen him. One evening, as the sun set over the horizon, Hanwoo took her hand and led her to the beach. They stood there, the waves crashing gently at their feet, the warm breeze ruffling their hair. "This is our new beginning," Hanwoo said, his voice soft but filled with promise. Jessica looked at him, her heart full. "I never imagined this would be my life, but now that I'm here, I wouldn't change a thing." Hanwoo smiled, pulling her closer. "I'm glad you're here with me. I've never been more certain about anything in my life." And with that, they kissed, the world around them fading into the background. This was their new life, their new chapter. They were free. The past no longer defined them. Together, they would build a future filled with love, laughter, and the promise of a new beginning.